Yeah, thank you. Okay.
We are live on YouTube. Got a minute.
We actually have 2 minutes. It shouldn't.
Let's make it one.
Madam Clerk, my time has 4:30, so I suggest we start the meeting.
This is a special meeting of City Council. And the first motion I have is a motion by Councilors Shoemaker and Hollingsworth that the agenda for August 18, 2022 special City Council meeting as presented be approved.
All in favor? Approved. Want to note that Councillor Christian and Councillor Scott are both with us and they're with us virtually.
And under agenda item 2, declaration of pecuniary interest.
We have none declared, seeing none being indicated at council. No pecuniary interest, councillors. No, that's it, Madam Clerk.
Under agenda item 3, the first item 3.1 is with respect to the tender for the relocation of Mill Market. I have motion by Councillors Hilsinger and Hollingsworth. Resolved that the report of the manager of purchasing dated August 18, 2022 be received, and subject to funding approval per CDS report elsewhere on the agenda, that the tender submitted by Rousseau General Contracting for the relocation of Mill Market 73 Brock Street at the negotiated tendered price of $2,994,000 plus HST as requested by Community Development and Enterprise Services be approved. Further, that the city's consultant, MGP Architects and Engineering, be authorized to issue a letter of intent to Rousseau General Contracting to commence mobilization for the project.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Before I take questions or comments from council, I'm going to go to you, Mr. Bear. Mr. Bear, do you have any synopsis you want to give to both council and the general public watching about why we would be here today?
A tender was issued for the Mill Market project, and the low bidder for the project was Rousseau Construction at a cost of $3.389 million. Staff and the consultant team at MGP Architects engaged the low bidder. It was over budget, but we engaged them as per purchasing policies to value manage the project and see if we could decrease the cost. The design essentially stuck to the core elements, knowing market conditions. We tried to stick to the basics for the project, so there weren't a number of options to reduce the project. With that said, an opportunity to reduce the cost by $395,000 was identified, including switching the siding from metal siding to stonework and stucco for savings of $245,000, and also by having Public Works do some of the site servicing work would be a savings of $150,000. So this results in a recommended project award of $2.994 million plus applicable HST, which is a total of $3,046,694, which is $946,694 over the previously approved budget. So to cover this overage, staff is recommending two things. One, that the $200,000 that was allocated to the Promenade project, which is elsewhere on the council agenda tonight, be allocated to the Mill Market project. This would result in not awarding the Promenade project from the tender that was recently closed. We can request to FedNor, and we will see if they would be able to extend that funding, so that should the council want to proceed with that project, we would have that funding available in 2023. There's no guarantees of that, but we can make that request of FedNor. Secondly, it was recommended the remaining amount required to award the Mill Market project, which is $746,694, come from prior years uncommitted capital transportation funds. Utilizing these value management savings and these other funding sources would result in no levy impact for the project award. It should be noted that the Mill Market Board is still pursuing funding with the Green and Inclusive Community Buildings Program. As the addendum indicated, even as of this morning, we had a call with the representatives from this program. I would characterize it as a very positive discussion we had with them. The application is still being reviewed. Obviously, we don't know if we're going to be receiving that funding, but it was a very positive discussion. And one important note for council is that the funding program would allow costs back to April 1st, 2021. Should council approve the award of the tender and the city receives that funding, we can actually go back and cover all costs in the project back to April 1st, 2021, which is great news if we do receive that funding. So why are we recommending the project to proceed? The relocation of the Mill Market is an important component of the downtown revitalization strategy. The building was purchased with the intent of relocating the market over 2 years ago. The site certainly creates a number of positive synergies with the downtown plaza, the mobile retail units, and the future events and programming that's anticipated with the downtown plaza site and the Mill Market site. In addition, the current Mill Market facility was never intentioned to be a permanent home for the market. That facility will require significant capital investment and remediation moving forward. And council did pass a resolution to examine opportunities to develop the gateway site. Obviously, this would necessitate a relocation of the market. And by proceeding to move it to 73 Brock Street, that site is available and clear for future development. I did want to point out that the Mill Market has been successful with the funding application to OMAFRA for $250,000. In addition, the Mill Market is making a $40,000 contribution to the project, as well as $410,000, which they will pay back over a period of time with leasehold improvements that we will be making. So for all those reasons, that is why staff is recommending the project. We think it's an important component of the downtown revitalization strategy. The timing of the project will line up well with the completion of the plaza. And then we think the vision for the projects that council has endorsed can be fully achieved.
Thank you, Mr. Bear. So council, questions of staff, Councilor Vezoil.
Thank you. Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Mr. Ver. Mr. Ver, before going through financials, I just want to ask you about the actual board of directors for the Mill Market and the vendors that are involved with the Mill Market, and conversations, if there's any opposition to the move, if they have any concerns, or if this is a project that they support and want to see happen.
And through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councilor Vezoil, and I can say that the board is in full support of the project. I know there have been some vendors who, expressed concerns about parking or different aspects, but, the board's fully in support of, we're understanding that the majority of the vendors are all supportive of the move and are looking forward to the new plaza and market combination and the benefits that they can achieve there.
In terms of the new space, Mr. Ver, how many more spaces or vendors can be included with the building, the capacity in the new spot?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councilor Vezoil, I don't have that number. Do you have it? I'll refer this question over to Mr. Lamb.
Okay, thank you.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councilor Vezoil, all the existing vendors can be accommodated. In addition, there'll also be the 5 mobile retail units will be able to accommodate more. So all the existing vendors will be accommodated, plus additional opportunities.
How many current vendors are there in the market? I'm trying to think in my head by walking down the aisle, but I don't know that number.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councilor Vezoil, they're at capacity right now, so it's 40 vendors at this time.
40 vendors, and we can accommodate those 40 vendors in the new space? And is there room for more vendors in the new space is my question as well.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councilor Vezoil, yes, we can accommodate all of them, and we can accommodate 5 more with mobile units.
Okay, thank you. Tom, just a question concerning the first allocation when we were back here in June and we approved that 1.4 million of the city contribution. Can you please just review what that encompasses in terms of funding? I just want to make it known to the public that it's not coming from the levy and where that 1.4 million is coming from.
Yes, through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councilor Vezoil, the 1.4 million was made up of $708,089 from the Asset Management Reserve, $300,000 from the Community Development Fund, We had an underage, which was coming from the CCBF for the architecture and engineers, the approved budget for that. So that was 97,693. So that's essentially coming from the CCBF. And we also had the remaining CCBF top-up allocation of 294,218. So that totaled the $1.4 million.
Okay, and my last question, originally when you came to us in August 2021, you had the original cost at 2.9 million, which is what we have in front of us today, very fortuitous. And we recommended, and you came back and we recommended and approved the 2.262. What elements were taken out of that project to bring the budget a little further down the scale?
Yes, through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Venezuelan. When we looked at the project initially at 2.9 million, we did a value management exercise internally with staff working with the mill market. So there were some things related to an elevator, a commercial kitchen, some features that we deemed were more nice to have versus necessities. And so that's where we lowered the project to get to that $2 million mark. Obviously, market conditions have changed since then. And as you pointed out, we're back up to the amount that we are now with this tender result.
Okay, and the Green Inclusive Community Building Fund that I know they went in, was it over $1 million the original ask? And they were asked to resubmit the market board?
And through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Venezuelan. Initially, the market submission was over $3 million.
Okay,
And that was the entire project with some additional items that they were hoping to get if they achieved that funding through the Green Inclusive Building Program.
okay, such, wasn't it a commercial kitchen and things like that?
That's right, that's right.
Okay, so they've reevaluated, resubmitted for 800,000, I believe?
And through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Venezuelan, we've actually resubmitted for the project as it's currently scoped, well as we had it previously scoped at the $2 million mark.
Okay,
And the funding from the Green and Inclusive Program can cover up to 70% of the costs. Yeah.
okay. Thank you very much, Mr. Ver.
Thank you.
Nothing further.
Councillor Hollingsworth.
Thank you. Through you, Mayor. A lot of my questions were answered, but through you, Mayor, to Mr. Ver. So it sounds like we agree that this particular market is going to be the main anchor, the key to attract hundreds of people down to this new potential plaza. Is that correct?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Hollingsworth, that is correct. The market as it stands today is attracting about 3,000 people on a Saturday or more. And so we really see it as a key component of activation there. As well, with the mobile retail units that will be there, we think there's an opportunity for attracting even more people there, as well as for people to extend their stay in the downtown after they've finished visiting the market.
When you refer to 3,000, are you referring to just the summer months, or are you looking at the entire year? I have visited, everyone's visited the market, even the winter, and it seems like it's a good turnout for the winter, but can you elaborate?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, I'm going to defer that to Director of Community Services, Brent Landon.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Hollingsworth. Yes, 3,000 is a good figure. We've topped out on some Saturdays at 4,000 for the market. Through COVID, the bottom, I believe, was 700, even in challenging times. So it's quite active, quite regularly on Saturdays and Wednesdays as well. Now that's actually going quite a bit.
Okay. If hypothetically we do not approve this tonight, Mr. Ver, correct me if I'm wrong, will the existing market stay in its existing location? First question. Second question, we know that particular building still needs attention. Would that particular building still service us, and for how long?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Hollingsworth, I think fair to say that the market could stay there as long as there's no other use for that property. So obviously we are looking to develop that site. The building itself does need capital repairs, and we would have to do a building condition assessment and more direct investment into the building in order to keep the market there if we were planning to keep it there long term.
And at this time, you don't have a dollar figure, what that would be?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Hollingsworth, no, we haven't done that assessment. Obviously, our hope was to move it over to the mill market, so we haven't done that work.
Okay. And one final question, going back to the anchor idea, that this is a key. Your staff, your team, have you looked at any other anchors that could replace the market to bring us 3,000 people to bring us this volume that we need. Is there any other ideas out there that you're looking at?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Hollingsworth, I would say no, we haven't really, because the intention was to move the mill market there. We haven't been investigating new anchors for that site. So we haven't done that work.
Okay, and it sounds like we can't delay this because of the reason, just for the viewers at home, we can't delay this decision longer. Why?
Yeah, through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Hollingsworth, two things. One is that obviously the tender closed on July 28th. And so the pricing that the vendor has put through only is good for 90 days. As well, we tried to wait as long as we could, hoping we would get the funding news in advance of the council decision here. But we are heading into reduced activities for council as of tomorrow. So if we want to make this decision to move forward, it would need to be done today.
Okay. So the bottom line is that this market is critical for the success of this plaza because it will attract 3,000 people on average. And without it, it'll be just an empty plaza. So this is critical for us, for the project and for the downtown.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Hollingsworth, I would agree it's critical for the project. I think, it wouldn't be empty. We'll have other activities in the plaza, but this is a critical component and we think it provides great synergies for the overall project.
Okay, because the other components may not attract the 3,000, may attract 100 people. Thank you. That's all.
Councilor Bruni.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And I have a few questions to Mr. Laming. First of all, Mr. Laming, you said that the 40 vendors will be transferred over to the new facility. And the only thing you're adding on is the 5 mobile units, correct? So this building is not bigger than the present. Would you agree?
Maybe Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Bruno, yes, the way it's not any bigger than the existing space. It's just reconfiguration of space of the 2 buildings. So there'll be a primary producing area and then there'll be the artesian market that will be within it. So where we've configured it so that all the existing vendors could fit in there with a few additionals.
The additionals is the mobile units, correct?
Maybe Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Bruno, that is correct.
Okay, so we can't increase the vendors, only the 5 mobile units. I guess I'm really stuck on this parking issue. If you say there's 3,000 to 4,000 people that can't attend, and we'll say 3,000 as a number, 1,500 vehicles, where will they be parked? Like, do we have a plan for the parking issues?
Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Bruni, we have an excess of 550 spaces within a 1-block radius, right adjacent to the plaza with the existing spots that are on site. We have the north and south parking lots of the Civic Center. We have the new seniors lot that is being done right now presently that has some new spaces, plus 2 other public lots that are within the 1-block radius. So that will account for many of the patrons that go there. Through the market day, not all 3,000 are there at once, right? Like usually it's between 9 to 2. So there's constant flow coming and going. And at the existing mill market, it's essentially a dirt parking lot and it would be less than half of that parking right now that accommodates that.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I've spoken to the vendors at the mill market and I guess their only concern is if they could have got the parking lot graded. They're very content where they are. And I just want to say that publicly. But I do have issues with the parking. Also, I guess my other issue is this building is only going to be basically open on a Wednesday and a Saturday, correct? What other activities will go there to support the other days?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Bruni, it's a good question and actually one we discussed today with the funding agency in that our vision for that building is it's animated and occupied 7 days a week. And so we've been doing a lot of work as staff and with the Mill Market Board to outreach to different partners to undertake activities in that space the other days of the week. And, happy to say that we've had a lot of interest and uptake, whether it be from the Indian Friendship Center, the Métis Council of Sault Ste. Marie, the Algoma Art Gallery, the cultural groups in Sault Ste. Marie, Acano, the Northern Ontario Latin Hispanic Association, the Islamic Association, the Chinese Association, the Filipino Association. We've had discussions with both school boards, the Algoma District School Board, the Huron District School Board. And part of this work was preparing for the report on downtown activation the council had asked for. But as we talked to them about the space at the plaza, as well as the building, the mill market that will be adjacent to it, there's a lot of activities from different groups on how they could utilize that space. As well, we have programming from the city as it relates to active living, 55 plus, that we think we can also activate that space on the days that the market isn't there. So all that to say, there's a lot of optimism on our part as staff that this building will be utilized 7 days a week. We will be able to make it available to the community, and it'll be a great enhancement to that area, both the plaza and the downtown.
Well, you bring a very interesting point forward. You have plans that this facility will be utilized 7 days a week with everything that you've explained. And the mill market is only a day and a half, we'll say, opened at the new location. It would have been nice to receive the building assessment on the old mill market. This way, I think council would be able to make a decision. Understanding, I know you want, or staff wants it to be moved to the new location. I understand that. But as a counselor, I think I have to look at both sides. So back to the funding, what funding are you waiting for this project? Funding that was refused and funding that you're hoping to receive. Can you elaborate on that a little bit?
Yeah, through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Bruni. So the current program we're waiting on a funding decision on is the Green and Inclusive Community Building Program. And then the funding that has been received is the $250,000 from the OMAFRA RED program.
The one that you're waiting on is how much approximately?
It would be 70% of the $2 million. So
1.4 million.
1.4 million.
And we don't know, or that's been refused.
No,
That's on hold right now.
we resubmitted an application in
Yes.
June to that program, so that the decision, we're just waiting for the decision on that.
And do we know when that decision will be?
We don't have a timeline other than staff are currently actively reviewing the application now. It's a rolling application program, so it's not like there's a block of applications that they're reviewing at one time going through. This one's rolling, so they're actively reviewing our file.
Okay. Back to the mobile units to Mr. Laming, Mr. Mayor. You said there's going to be 5 there. Presently at the mill market, there are 1.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to
2.
Councilor Bruni, there are 2. We're actually piloting 2. So one is a restaurant with Robert's that's been active, and the other one is a soap vendor that's in that facility right now, the second one.
Will they be transferred to the mill market?
Through you, Mr.
To the
Mayor,
new
to
mill
Councilor
market?
Bruni, that's correct. All 5 will be at the market.
Okay. That's it for now, Mr. Mayor. Thank you. Appreciate it.
Any other councillors? Oh, apologize. Thank you. Councillor Christian, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I don't have any questions. I basically have comments.
Well, we can take those now because it
Sure.
seems like we don't have a lot of questions left, so we can take comments.
Sure. I mean, I've said from the beginning that escalating costs scare me. I understand that, but I also believe that we need to move forward. The current building that the mill market is in is not in good shape. Without sounding too crass, it's not much more than it almost looks like it's a barnyard in there. It's a barn. I mean, it's old, it leaks. And I think the vendors deserve better than that. I think this move to the plaza area is advantageous. I think it's something that we need to do to move forward as a community to try to develop the downtown. I'm always surprised at people who say, why are we spending money on the downtown when it's in such rough shape? And they basically answer their own question by asking the question. We need to invest in the downtown. There's plenty of parking. I've been to the Mill Market. I used to frequent it quite a bit. I still do. The traffic there is consistent, so you don't need spaces for 3,000 people. You need adequate space, but I'm sure that the area by the Mill Market, the proposed Mill Market, will have plenty of space. I hear talk that they want to utilize those vendor locations 7 days a week. And listening to Tom Bear talking about the different cultural groups, it sounds like my international marketplace proposal that I brought forward about 7 or 8 years ago. I won't be around at council to push the issue, but I certainly, if that's the direction or the thought that future council is looking at, I'll be supporting it 100% as a private citizen. I think that we need to get more cultural activity down there. And I still think that an international marketplace or an international component in that area will be needed and welcomed. I guess what I'm saying is that we need to be progressive here. We need to spend the money and make this happen. We can't keep complaining about things that are wrong in this city and not be willing to spend the money. I know the populist decision right now for some would be to turn this down because of cost. I understand that cost is important, but we also have to invest in our future. And I think that even if we had to fund this on our own, and I'm not suggesting we do that, but if we had to, I think it's something that we need to do. We need to start investing in our community, and particularly in the downtown core. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Christian. Councillor Dufour, I had you next on my list. And Councillor Shoemaker.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. I just had a couple questions, if that was okay.
Yeah, go ahead.
Through you to Mr. Baird, does the new space include a commercial kitchen, or was that one of the elements that staff pared down?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Dufour, it does not. That was one of the items we pared down.
Okay. Has staff considered roughing in the services required to add a commercial kitchen in the future so that we could do that at a lower cost at a future date?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Dufour, it was discussed, but it wasn't something that we included within the scope, just given our intent to try and keep the project on our budget.
Okay. If the federal funding ends up coming through, is it something that we could consider adding either the servicing or the kitchen? My point of view here is, especially in light of our efforts to program the space 7 days a week, I do know that there are several groups that have reached out to me asking if there is public commercial kitchen space for rent. And I think that it would be a strong addition to the kind of services and hub that you guys will be in the future trying to add on to the Mill Market.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Dufour, certainly that's something we can, if we're successful, come back to council and bring back for decision.
Okay, thanks. And just a quick recap. The current Mill Market building, is it connected to city sewers?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Dufour, no, it is not. The Mill Market does have to pay for pump out services, and there are fairly limited washroom services that are within that facility.
Thanks. And how long ago was it that the building had been slated for demolition? 5 years, 10 years?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Dufour. I had that previously. I believe that was 10 years ago that it was slated for demolition, approximately.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. Should I just roll into my comments now?
Let's do it. Yeah.
Awesome. So this building has been limped along for 10 years. It's not even connected to city sewers or city services. It was built as a temporary fish hatchery, and it's basically been band-aided up to be good enough. And Sault Ste. Marie needs to stop thinking about just getting along with good enough as cheap as possible. If we really want to distinguish ourselves from other cities, if we want to show our citizens that we are invested in having a city that's a quality place to live, a city that is going to compete for workers, and a city that is going to attract people, then we need to stop putting up with good enough. And sometimes, that means putting your foot forward, spending some money when the money's called for. I think staff have actually done an incredible job of almost kind of negotiating with themselves, bringing us forth a preliminary estimate, trying to pare it back down, and now we're coming back and we're right back at the preliminary estimate. They were right the whole time. But here we are, some folks may want to point out that this is an overrun, yet, that preliminary estimate is only 18 months old and they were right on. So I think when you're doing these kinds of projects, again, Sault Ste. Marie has too long of a history of going with just good enough and paring things back down and regretting it later. So I'm proud of the work that staff's done in bringing us the best value they could, and I'm proud to support the project. So thanks, Mr. Mayor.
Thanks, Councilor Dufour. Councilor Shoemaker.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. A couple questions through you, Mr. Mayor, to Mr. Ver. The original, I won't call it the preliminary estimate, but the high level cost that was brought to council when the move of the mill market was initially proposed to the plaza was $2 million. Am I correct about that?
Excuse me, Mr. Mayor, for the mill market project?
That's right.
Yeah, the initial report we brought in with the consultants was 2.9 million.
Yes, that's when a consultant got involved, but in a prior report, it was, I think, estimated by staff to be in the range of around $2 million, was it not?
Right.
Yes. And so then a preliminary report came from a consultant, probably our architects and engineers, that said it would cost approximately 2.9 million.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councilor Shoemaker, that's correct.
And at that point, who asked staff to value manage that down to 2 million?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councilor Shoemaker. That was something that staff did working with the mill market board. We took a look at that budget and we, looked at items like the commercial kitchen and the elevator, and we were looking for ways that we might be able to pare back, some of the wish list in order to bring the project back to our initial scope for the project.
Which was 2 million.
Mhm.
So staff took it on their own to bring they thought the budget at 2.9 would be too high, so they brought it down to 2 million.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councilor Shoemaker, that's correct.
And so now we have tendered the project and it's come in at a $3 million budget.
Through you,
3.3.
Mr. Mayor, to Councilor Shoemaker, right.
Well, it came in at 3.3 and you've since taken another $300,000 out.
Right.
So for $1 million more than staff originally kind of preliminarily estimated this project to cost, we're getting a building that has more than $1 million of costs taken out of it. We're getting a lot less building for $1 million more than what you've originally estimated it to cost.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councilor Shoemaker, I would say, obviously the things we can't predict are related to the supply chain issues, the inflation, the pandemic, the war in Russia. A number of things have factored into the increased cost for this project, which is not something anybody saw when we were initially looking at value managing the project.
Okay, yeah, and the 700 and I don't have the exact, roughly 700,000 that staff is seeking to use from the capital transportation funds. That is surplus money from previous years' unspent budgets, isn't it?
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councilor Shoemaker, correct.
Oh,
Sorry, I'll let the CFO or the CAO to comment on it.
So I'm going to go to him first.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councilor Shoemaker, and I will let the CFO add in any other detail after I'm finished, but that represents previous year's capital transportation funds that weren't needed for a specific project. So for things like contingency funding that was added in the project cost, but in the end, not required. We do track this, and every so often we bring a portion back to council. Most recently in 2021, for the 2021 budget, we added in 2.1 million from that source. We are tracking well this year. We're one of the very few communities in Ontario that whose road work has come in pretty much on estimate and not been subject to the same pressures as building. So we are tracking well, and we do expect to be able to bring things some more forward at next year's budget.
Okay, great. You answered my question, but I just want to be clear on, you answered my next question, I should say, but I just want to be clear on what you said. Last year, in 2021, we had from previous years, capital transportation budgets, $2.1 million in additional funds that we put into our roads.
Put into the capital transportation. I'm not sure if it was entirely for roads. I think there may have been other capital projects. Obviously, roads are a very significant component of our capital work, but we do other projects as well. So it is part of that whole funding envelope.
Right.
The CFO may be able to add detail to that.
To you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Shoemaker, the 2.1 that was used in the 2021 capital budget, $1 million was used for the boardwalk, which was an engineering type project. We put 560,000 into transit, a small amount into fire for their NG 911, 385,000 for civic center lobby redesign, and then another 75,000 was allocated to the IT department for some hardware that they required. So this does happen periodically. That was one of our larger ones. So when we have excess funds, whether it be in the capital transportation budget or other budgets, those funds become part of the pool that we use when we prioritize all of our capital request projects, and that comes to council. In previous years, we have used additional capital transportation excess funds for additional resurfacing, different projects. So it just depends on what the prioritizations are. And again, part of the issue we have that the CAO or engineering can speak to more so probably is our capacity limits of what we can do for different projects as well.
Right, right. You're saying that there is potentially an issue of getting enough or additional construction type companies to complete additional roads.
Correct.
Got you. Okay. My last question is on timing, and Mr. Bear touched on it a little bit, but this decision we're making today, could we make it tomorrow?
Through you,
Depends.
yeah, through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Shoemaker, if we want to hold a meeting before 2 p.m. Yes.
So at this time,
Yeah.
24 hours from now, we couldn't make this decision.
No, that's because likely, and we can't speak until the nomination day deadline, that you would be in a restricted acts situation for council. What that means is council would be unable to approve items that weren't previously budgeted for. So you will not be able to approve the overage. That's why we have to bring this to you tonight instead of waiting for the answer on the federal funding. Obviously, should we receive the federal funding, then that reduces the commitment you're making tonight. But just the way the timing is lining up, and this particular year being an election year, that's the way we need to proceed if we're going to proceed with the project.
Right. Okay. Well, you again, you almost preempted my comments with your answer there. So I appreciate you anticipating what I was going to say. But I mean, we haven't got the federal funding, and we are approving this with our fingers crossed that we will get the federal funding. I think moving the mill market down to the plaza actually is quite a good idea. Despite not supporting the plaza in the first place, I think since the plaza was approved, moving the mill market there makes some sense. But it makes a lot more sense, in my opinion, to see if we can get the federal funding before determining how much we're prepared to spend on that. And maybe there needs to be some paring back. I understand there has been already. But I think that going forward with this solely on city dollars is a step that we shouldn't be taking at this point. And we should be determining whether or not there's additional federal funding available, and let the next council decide whether to retender it or fund it, frankly. And that could be a decision they'd make. And I think that would be the most reasonable path forward. So I won't be supporting this.
Thank you. Councillor Gardy.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. So for quite a number of councils, and specifically the one that I've been involved in and all of you have been involved in, we always talk about creating an engaging community with a great quality of life, that we're in desperate need to attract new businesses and retain young people and attract talent and families. And that we want to support business. And for decades, we've been hearing about revitalizing downtown, and our tourist operators and hoteliers would love people to come here more often and to extend their stay longer than they do. To me, this project checks all of those boxes clearly. And in a couple of months, over the course of the next couple of months, to whatever office anybody around this council is aspiring, they're going to talk about creating an engaging community with a strong quality of life and attracting business and supporting business. You can't support business in the community without supporting all of the businesses in the community, especially fledgling businesses in the community. And this is a once in a generation project to revitalize an area of our community that we constantly hear needs a boost. So I am very supportive of this. I am very optimistic that we will get some support from the federal government, considering all of what they talk about as it relates to all of those facets that I mentioned. We're coming out of a pandemic. It's going to be a little bit of an unknown moving forward, but we need to invest in our community, because if you thought prior to the pandemic that competition for talent and families and retaining young people was tough, we're heading into a time that will make that effort pale in comparison. We need this, and I am very supportive of it. Thank you.
I don't have anybody else on my list here. Councillor Hollingsworth, you want to make comments?
I have a comment, but I just want to ask a clarifying question, just one, if I may.
Yeah, sure.
Through you, Mayor, to Mr. White. Going back to Councillor Shoemaker's comment, as you just clearly said to us, 2 o'clock tomorrow is our deadline. We basically have to make a decision today. Hypothetically, if we agree with this price and we agree to move forward, and let's say in a few months, there's an overage, it goes over the budget. Does that mean that this project is going to be put on hold until the new council comes into play? Like hypothetically, if there's an overage, something that we did not consider, what happens? We can't make a decision.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Hollingsworth. What you're doing now is making a decision tonight about awarding a tender. That becomes a project then that has certain contingencies built into it, and it would not be expected to have overages. I mean, you're dealing with the overage tonight as far as it being an overestimate. So I wouldn't anticipate any council decisions needing to be made until the conclusion of the project.
Okay, fair enough. I'm cynical. We've always seen overages. But besides that, I just wanted that clarified. Thank you.
Councillor Venezuelan, and then Councillor Hilsinger.
Thank you. Just comments, Mr. Mayor. I appreciate it. So I really want to echo my colleague Corey Gardy's comments. I think it's really important that we invest in our community. And we just saw Algoma Steel with the electric arc furnaces invest $700 million. That positions us as such a unique player in the steel industry, and it's going to create jobs and grow our economy. And that was a big conversation. I just came back from AMO, and Councillor Dufour was there, and Councillor Gardy. And, you know, from both small communities to larger communities, the big talk was about, you know, supporting economics. And how do we do that? We do it by creating healthy communities. And that goes in a variety of different sectors. You know, whether you're talking about, we were all talking about homelessness and housing. We were all talking about, you know, opioid addiction and all other mental health issues that plague all of our communities, not throughout just Northern Ontario, and Canada. So when you take a look at one of our historically largest players in the economic field of Sault Ste. Marie, and they're investing $700 million. And we're debating on a project that's much less than that. And I also want to remind my colleagues that we approved without funding the twin pad, which, if memory serves me, I think it was about $32 million. This is an economic driver. The market is an economic driver. It supports local growers, local producers, artists, restaurateurs. Markets are fantastic. And we will have a beautiful market that not only, when we're talking about parking, the amount of people that are going to be within walking distance with all the apartment buildings from East Street to the Villa Maria to the senior center, it's going to create such a better quality of life for them because they can just grab their cart and walk to the market and be part of that community. So I support this full 100%. I think it's going to totally transform what we're doing, and we need to do it because we want newcomers. We want people living here, and we need to create that culture and that stability in our economy, and this will do that. So thanks very much, Tom and Brent, for your team, for all the work that you do, and especially all the work with the market. Working with the board is hard, and I support this 100%. Thanks.
Councillor Hilsinger, and then Councillor Nero.
Thank you. Not to reiterate other comments, I mean, it's very clear. Those that are in favor of this, and everybody's prescribed exactly why. We identified a problem a number of years ago. We took a lot of time to create a strategy. We made a plan. We're trying to follow that plan. That plan means growth. That plan has extreme impact on the downtown economy, and there's just way too much downside to wait. Waiting is not, we can't wait. We need to do. So our staff have figured out how to make this happen. And I'm fully supportive of this happening so that we can, as we go along into the winter and into next summer, when we're going to see this fabulous space open, and it's going to be so glorious and beautiful, and it's going to completely change what it feels like downtown. And our businesses are going to be happy. Our residents are going to be happy. We're going to show how culturally vital and what cultural vitality is. And it's not worth waiting. So let's just get it done. I'm in complete support.
Thank you, Councillor Nero.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I certainly agree with all the comments that were made in support of this project moving forward. I just want to stress a couple of the things that were already said, basically, but I mean, this project goes directly to the downtown revitalization. The present building, the present Mill Market building, slated for demolition for 10 years, and it's still there. That's unbelievable. We need to do something. And just a simple fact that the building that they're using right now is in the middle of the city and it's not connected to city services is just absurd. We just need to move this project forward. Thank you.
Councillor Scott. Thank you, Councillor Nero.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm not going to reiterate a lot of what the other councillors said. I can appreciate both sides of the argument, and I think Councillor Shoemaker is correct. It's nice to see it downtown if we are going to do it. We're moving forward with the plaza. It makes sense. I still have my reservations around parking, and I do have to agree with Councillor Shoemaker saying that it feels like we're getting less of a building for more of a price. For those particular reasons, I will not be supporting that this evening. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments from councillors? So I should explain my perspective, I think, before we vote, so the public has the benefit of it. With respect to parking, I hope we create a parking problem in the downtown, and you can report that however you like, but I would love to see a parking problem in the downtown of our city. We currently don't have one. I don't believe, based on our staff's advice, that this is going to create one, but if it did, I, for one, would be happy about that, because that would mean that people were downtown, there was activity downtown. With respect to waiting, we've got a limited number of time that we can wait to make a decision once a tender is out. I feel that if we do wait and we leave this decision for the future, I would be surprised if the project came back at less than it currently is now. So I think we could probably, if we move now, get it for the best price that we could get it for. And I'll make one last comment, which is something that Councillor Hilsinger pointed out. And I certainly don't have her enthusiasm naturally, but I will say that this is the result of a lot of work and a holistic plan that was developed by the community and by our staff. And what we're doing is we're working that plan and we're actioning that plan, and we're finishing a major component of what is our downtown revitalization strategy. I, for one, believe, like when we did Bay Street, and I've said this a couple of times, once Bay Street was done, people really liked it. I think the same thing is going to happen once the plaza is finished and once the Mill Market is relocated. And I think it will be a really positive project that has significant value, that's coming in at a reasonable price. I personally am comfortable spending the money that we're authorizing staff to spend tonight, but I actually don't believe we're going to have to, because I believe we are going to get some level of success with the federal government, and we will receive additional funding from them. That is my belief. But in any event, we're not approving this project based on that funding tonight. We're approving this project authorizing to spend ourselves, which I think is money well spent of our own resources to invest in our own downtown. And if we don't invest in our own facilities, in our own municipality, we can't expect other people to do so. So I'm happy to support this project, and I'd like to thank staff and the team at the Mill Market. And I know, Mr. Lamming, that you've had a lot of work between staff and the team at the Mill Market. I want to recognize everybody for what I think is a really good project coming as a result of a lot of really hard work. And I appreciate your contributions and your leadership, and I appreciate you making this happen and bringing it to us here today. Madam Clerk, I think that would be, we can call the vote on that. You've read the motion already. So the vote's on the screen. All in favor? Opposed? Carries 8-3. Is that the call that you have, Madam Clerk?
I didn't get Councillor Gardy, but you are in the affirmative, right? And Councillor Christian,
I'm in favor.
He was in favor.
that's 8-3.
Thank you. Thank you, Council. So Madam Clerk, that brings us to,
Under that subject, there is a second motion
yep,
by Councillors Hilsinger and Christian. Resolved that the report of the Deputy CAO Community Development and Enterprise Services dated August 18, 2022 be received, and City Council authorize an additional contribution of $946,694 to the project. Further, that the shortfall amount be funded utilizing the $200,000 previously committed to the Promenade project and a contribution of $746,694 from prior years uncommitted capital transportation funds. Further, that the staff request FedNor provide an extension of the $500,000 in funding awarded to the Promenade project so that the city may be able to re-tender the project in the spring of 2023.
any questions on this motion, Council? Seeing none, all in favor? Opposed? So that was 9-2. Shoemaker and Scott opposed. The remainder in favor.
Passes 9-2. And the third is just a motion to accept the supplementary report. It's a motion by Councillors Shoemaker and Hollingsworth. Resolved that the report of the Deputy CAO Community Development and Enterprise Services dated August 18, 2022 concerning the Mill Market tender be received as information.
All in favor? That motion is carried unanimously.
And under agenda item 4, it's a motion by Councillors Shoemaker and Christian. Resolved that the report of the manager of purchasing dated August 18, 2022 be received, and that the bid solicitation as requested by Community Development and Enterprise Services be closed with no award as the single source bid exceeds the approved budget.
Any questions, comments on that, Council? Councilor Nero?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Question to staff. Are there options on how to replace this part of the boardwalk, this promenade section, or is there just one way to do it? With the estimates coming in so high, are there other options to look at?
Mr. Bear is going to speak to this.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, to Councillor Nero, it is something that we are looking at with staff and exploring different options. So that's something we will consider and hopefully, not hopefully, something we will bring back to council in the future.
Okay, that's good. It just seems that it's way out of line, the estimate for just that section of boardwalk.
Short run of docking.
Exactly. And I don't know if it's, it came out the way it did because we're asking for it to be done in a certain way. Or like Mr. Gar said, let's look at some options and maybe a lot more economical to complete.
Anybody else on that? Okay, all in favor? Motion carried unanimously.
And a motion by Councillors Hilsinger and Hollingsworth that this council now adjourn.
All in favor? Carried. Thank